I hope you guys can hear me now. Again, joint work with Junji Quinn, Elian Bitar, Akhil Shetty, and myself, and really inspired by Praveen Baraya. Can't seem to go to the next slide. Okay, there we go. Praveen died 2 years ago, tragically, and I still miss him deeply. So my research at Berkeley is really on energy systems, transportation systems, infrastructure, but mainly about the microeconomics of infrastructure, policy, regulation, less so, in fact, not at all about the engineering of these, of these systems. Like I don't build, three-phase inverters and how to study that kind of stuff. I don't have the talent to do so. It's very important, but not for me. But I don't have a taste for that. Also, I'm now recently working on AI because everybody on the planet is working on AI. And so my particular focus is really on what can you not do with AI? Sort of contrarian view of what can you not learn in RL? So this is that's joint work with sort of I started just looking at it with a few of my colleagues at Berkeley, and also for hyperbolic embeddings. It seems I see a lot of researchers using large language models on numeric data. For example, to do load forecasting in power systems, where they just encode numbers by letters. A is 1, B is 2. A complete loss of topological information. So garbage in, garbage out. So but it seems to work. Magic of throwing millions of dollars of hardware on a problem and not using your brain. I hope my bias does not come across. So this talk will be about transportation network services. What are transportation network services? Services that basically overlay on top of the transportation network. For example, ride hailing, Uber, Lyft, grocery delivery, Instacart, food delivery, Uber Eats, package delivery, Amazon, FedEx, United States Postal Service. These are all transportation network services. And if you look at Uber, for example, 7 billion rides in 2021, 2022, that 1 year, 30 billion in revenue. Only now are they profitable. Okay, they've raised fares, and that's the way to become profitable. There was a lull in the pandemic because people didn't go anywhere. Okay. But in that period, Uber Eats started delivering food like crazy, and it made up for the ride-hailing losses. So what's our agenda in transportation network services? It's twofold. It's economics. Many transportation network services remain unprofitable. We want to understand why. Are there these factors, like what kind of spatial and temporal demand density do you need? What kind of delays in the underlying transportation network can you tolerate? What about things like driver wage? Is that limiting profitability? There are also negative externalities we want to understand. Roadway congestion, low driver wages, emissions. And as a result of these negative externalities, transportation network services are being regulated. And we want to understand what are good policies to do so. Yeah, so that's what our agenda is. And also there are new transportation network services, that are coming or that one can imagine. For example, there are some new grid services, business-to-business delivery. And I'll tell you about this new grid service that we propose. And there are other things you can imagine: laundry delivery, dry cleaning delivery and pickup, medicines, things like that. How do we encourage and foster the growth of these new and organize the growth of these new transportation network services in the face of all these negative externalities? So let's talk about a new service, from the EV to the grid. So there's something called demand charge reduction. So let me tell you what demand charges are. If you are a commercial or industrial customer, you pay for electricity. Also, residential customers pay for electricity, but commercial and industrial consumers pay two things. They pay for usage, dollars per kilowatt hour. Maybe it's assessed monthly. And there are different kinds of rates, but that doesn't matter. So there's a rate, for example, 17 cents per kilowatt hour. How many kilowatt hours you multiply, you get your usage charge. But there's also a demand charge, which residential customers do not face. So what you do is, it's also assessed monthly. You look at the maximum energy consumption in 15-minute intervals across the month. Look at the maximum. And then you multiply that by the demand charge rate, and then you pay that. So what they're trying to penalize you for is for using very peaky electricity. Because producing electricity when the demand is peaky is more costly. Okay, so this is a crude tool to sort of even out the electricity demand. Now, the demand charges can account for 50% of the electricity bills for these small industrial and commercial enterprises. So what's the value in reducing demand charges? So let's see. So plotted on this thing in red are the electricity consumption in 15-minute intervals. And you can see this blue peak over here. So you're paying a demand charge based on your peak consumption, which is the blue. If you can reduce the peak to the second highest peak, then you're saving that much of your demand charge. Okay. And it's actually significant. You could also reduce the second highest peak down to the third highest peak and so on. But in this example, you just do one peak. And for this small company, it's $300 a month. Okay. So there's value in reducing demand charge. Now, all you have to do is to supply a small amount of energy. Remember, these are 15-minute intervals multiplied by that blue line, the vertical distance. So you come down to the second height. It's not a lot of energy, and it's not frequent. It's once a month, 2, 3, 4 times a month. It's not a lot. So how do you supply this small amount of energy? You could have a fixed battery, but then, or a generator, but it's not used that frequently, used 3 times a month, for 15 minutes each time. So you don't recoup your capital costs, especially if you use a battery. Batteries are, $120 per kilowatt hour. They're expensive. And you're just not using it all the time. So a better idea is to use an electric vehicle, because the electric vehicle can service your demand charge reduction, drive to another place, service another company's demand charge reduction, drive somewhere else, and so also using it much more. Okay. So basically, the utilization rate is higher, so it's more cost effective. So this is the business model. You have an electric vehicle, it gets a service request, go there, it drives there, it gives you a little bit of energy, and then it waits for 15 minutes and then gets another service request, goes somewhere else, discharges, and it's not a lot of energy. Tesla has 75 kilowatt hours, and you're discharging maybe 10 kilowatt hours per location. So you can do 6 service calls before you have to, charge up your electric vehicle. But so it's viable, because it's only viable if these peaks are temporally dispersed. If every company has a peak at the same time, you can't service one company. you don't have the time to go to the other company. If they must be temporally dispersed, that's kind of clear. And we did extensive data analysis. This is from Ireland, also from the city of San Francisco. And it turns out, for whatever reason, these peaks are temporally dispersed. So you could look at the number of coincident peaks, yes.
And there is also another thing, because these peaks must be predictable in time.
We'll come to that too. So there are two aspects. You have to know when these peaks are occurring, because the company has to send the service request, and there's enough time for the car to come and deliver the charge. So the first point is, yes, they are temporally dispersed. The number of coincident peaks, on this data set, 2, maybe 3 at most. What I'm saying is, for 100 users, over the course of 17 months, we did analysis. And, you need, for 100 users, you need maybe 4, 5 electric vehicles to service everything. You don't need 100, you need much fewer. As far as prediction, that's another talk altogether. But we've tried to understand why are these peaks temporally dispersed. So we have a paper on that, modeling this. And to do forecasting, you have to be able to forecast the peaks maybe 3-4 hours in advance, to give the electric vehicle enough time to show up and discharge its electric. And it turns out you can do so. This is where all the energy is, in this place. We're not the only ones thinking about this. And so a lot of energy is focused on, research activity is focused on predicting the peaks at least 2 hours in advance. So people are able to do that, different, even if it's 45 minutes in advance, that's enough time to do this. And if you miss, maybe that wasn't your monthly peak, so fine, then you're getting the second highest peak, and you keep, I anticipate this other peak, and then so you might service that. So seems to work. It can be very cost effective. We did a very simple, business case analysis where you pay the driver a reasonable wage. You look at the capital cost of a two-way EV charger, and you look at driver side costs, and you look at wear and tear on the electric vehicle, etc. And it turns out you just need a modest number of electric vehicles to service the city of Oakland. Okay, maybe 6-7 electric vehicles for the city of Oakland, or 10. I forget the number, but it's a viable business. Barely. It works. Why barely? Because you're not using the electric vehicles all the time. You get like 2-3 service calls per month. There are 100-200 companies. It's not enough. And all these service calls are 15 minutes. So what do you do with the electric vehicle in the rest of the time? Well, you do Uber, you pick up passengers, and so, you have to look at multiple revenue streams. And when you combine transportation and grid services, then you have a decent business model. So where we are now is we're licensing our software to Uber, so they can use our forecasting software, so Uber can use their vehicles not just for ferrying passengers from one place to the other, but also to deliver good services. So let's return to general transportation network services. There's a common structure. The agents are the drivers that provide the service, their end customers, and there's a platform. So the drivers respond to wages. You give them more money and more drivers will show up. And they're almost always they're contract workers. So they work, they're not employees. They don't work 8 hours a day. They don't have healthcare benefits, none of this stuff. And the reason this works is because the demand for example, for ride hailing is temporally all over the place. In the morning, there's a peak, you need more drivers, so you pay a wage, a higher wage, more drivers will come. In the afternoon or at night, you don't need that many drivers. But if you had employees, then you're kind of screwed. You have to keep paying them money and you have to give them healthcare benefits. So all the Uber drivers, all the food delivery drivers are contract workers. You know, they're at-will employment, and they respond to wages. Customers respond to prices. So if you decrease the price, more people will, the delivery fee, more people will use Uber Eats, so on. Okay, so those are your two knobs to adjust. The thing on the platform is profit maximizing. So here's what we have. We have, on the one hand, these two agents, the customers that give you the demand, the drivers that give you the supply, and these are modulated by prices and wages. And then it's a geographic problem. It's a temporal geographic problem. So you have to match drivers with customers. So there's a complicated matching algorithm, and then the market response, and then you have also regulation on top. And beneath this, you have the transportation network. And if there are delays, that diminishes your quality of service. You may not be able to deliver your food in the guaranteed 1 hour delivery window, and then you have to pay some kind of penalty to the customer. So this is the ecosystem. So you can model some of these things. For example, you can model N, the number of drivers, as a supply function that responds to the wage variable. Lambda, the number of customers that respond to price, the delivery price, and to quality of service. So for example, you can have next day delivery, same day delivery, food, grocery delivery in a 4 hour window, 8 hour window. So there's a quality of service component to the demand function. And the quality of service depends on, there's a feedback loop. It depends on the number of customers, the number of drivers, and the matching out. So depending on these three things, I may or may not be able to deliver the packages in a 4 hour window, and so on. So this is the model. In a simple equilibrium, you might have, of course, it's geographic. You might have the number of drivers is equal to the number of customers, and so that's your equilibrium, and you can start doing analysis. It's more complicated than this, of course, and I'll show you some of the complexities. And what does a platform do? It just maximizes profit. What are its decisions? The driver wage to increase the supply or to modulate the supply of drivers, the delivery fee per unit P to modulate the demand, and the matching algorithm. And what is the profit? It is the demand times the price per unit minus it receives that as revenue, but it pays out a wage to the drivers, W times the number of drivers. So this is the very simple model. It's much more complicated because I'll show you some of the complexities. But you can use this model to start doing some economic analysis. You can add a lot of complexity. Customers can choose not to take an Uber and use public transportation. If the wait time is too long, do that. So you can also look at logit models to incorporate customer choices. Drivers can choose not to work because the pay is too low. You can also model that. You can put down maximum wait times. You can use queuing models. There's so much in the literature. I won't even begin to. There are no references in this talk. There's too many. So let's look at what is the economic basis for profitability of transportation network services. First, it's efficiency. So you want to be able to meet a time-varying demand. You can see this is the demand for ride-hailing, a peak in the morning, a peak at evening, and a lull at night and in the afternoon. If you had employees, you're stuck with these people. So you just hire more people when there's more drivers when there's more. And your knob is driver wage. And then the other thing is the data drives a larger market share, because now you know when your driver is coming, where the driver is, and that really, customers love that. So that's really created, out of nothing, a market for these transportation network services. But the economics are really still unfavorable for many network services. And the two drivers for this are costs, per unit delivery costs, and driver wages. So if I go back in time, before the pandemic, Uber lost $6 billion in one quarter. Now they're barely profitable. They've raised fares. So my trip from Berkeley to San Francisco airport used to be $40 on Uber. Now it's more like $100. But that hasn't seemed to have cut the demand. The demand elasticity, it's fairly inelastic, because it's just so convenient. It's competitive with taxis, so people still use Uber. Okay. Okay. The other problem was the high cost of delivery. Customers love on-demand delivery, but are not willing to pay the full cost of delivery. The actual cost is closer to maybe on average, $10 for a trip to deliver it and come back. But they're not willing to pay that, but they love the service. So these delivery companies find other ways to hide that delivery cost. Okay. Okay, and I told you about these negative externalities: low driver wages, emissions, congestion, equity. So transportation network services are not offered in many rural or unprofitable areas because the demand density is not high enough. So these externalities are causing governments to start to regulate transportation network services. For example, they're trying to impose minimum wage, okay? Because when you're an Uber driver, you pay for the wear and tear of your vehicle, you pay for the petrol, benzina, So in the end, even though maybe you're getting, $16 an hour, in the end you're getting $9, which is below mandated minimum wage. But minimum wage mandates do not apply to contract workers, okay? And there are increased emissions. So Uber generates 70% more pollution than the rides they displaced. There's more congestion, idle drivers drive around. Basically, the cars are running 50% of the time. They're just running around, making more emissions. They should just park. But if they park, then the city doesn't like it. It takes up parking spots, so they parallel park, stuff like that. Okay. So basically, there are a lot more regulations coming. So I'll point to a couple of regulations. One is to classify drivers as employees. So they work in 8-hour shifts. They receive healthcare, pension benefits, and so on. That's called Proposition AB5. There are congestion regulations. There are limits. For example, they limit the total CO, or they penalize total CO2 emissions of like Uber. They have to pay a carbon tax. There are all these emission, there are these constraints. Congestion. There's now per vehicle entering Manhattan an extra fee. If you're entering Manhattan, not if you're leaving Manhattan. In New York City, and legislatures are mandating equal access, And for example, for rural telephone service, that's what people did, you know, they mandated equal access. So today drivers are, so I'm going to focus now on driver classification and wage. So drivers are categorized as contractors. They pay for their fuel, insurance, etc. And the effect is a net pay of, say, less than $11 an hour, which is below minimum wage. So now people are trying to classify them as employees. So we want to understand this. So these Ubers and Lyfts, they really complain. They say, no, we cannot afford to have these people as employees because of two reasons. One, because our demand is time varying. So we're stuck with all these workers, so that we don't have a flexible workforce. And the second is that the wages will be too high and will be unprofitable. So they offered an alternative proposal. Said, don't worry, we'll pay drivers $22 an hour, which is much more than minimum wage. But in the fine print, it's per driving hour. And remember, they drive 50% of the time. So Uber is actually going to pay them $11 an hour. But the 22 sounds nice, so that was their counter proposal. And we have a counter proposal, which is classify drivers as employees, but to deal with the time varying demand, the employees work in staggered shifts. So I'll explain that in a minute. And you give them the minimum wage of $18 an hour. So what are staggered shifts? So for example, employees can work in 24 shifts, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. And you have different numbers of employees in each shift, okay? Of course, they're free to exchange among themselves, but what you control is the number of employees per shift. So let's say in shift I, let's do an example. Let's say there's a 4-hour workday, and you have 4 shifts, okay? So starting in, because I can't draw a 24 by 24 matrix, it's too much. So I say, think of the 4-hour workday. So in N1, N2, N3, N4 are the number of workers in each shift. In the first shift, they work for those 2 hours. In the second shift, they work for a shifted 2 hours. And the next is shifted. And so this is the shift matrix. And if I multiply this by the number of workers in each shift, that will tell you the number of workers working in each hour, okay? But the matrix A, that shift matrix, is not full rank. So you cannot get whatever pattern of workers you want, but you do get some improved flexibility in the number of workers, number of drivers available in each hour, okay? So this is what we thought of. So we have partial improvement in flexibility. And so we have this analysis framework. It's hour by hour. It's geographic. We have 16 zones in the city of San Francisco. And there are 3 things we're going to consider: baseline, which is the status quo. There are no wage constraints. Drivers are contract workers. Case 1, the drivers receive a minimum wage, 18 hours, but they're still contract workers. They work in 3 they're employees, but they work in 3 8-hour shifts, not staggered, but just 3 8-hour shifts. And case 2 is they work in 24 staggered shifts. So this is what we're going to study. So the driver supply model, again, it gets a little bit more complicated. So there's a pool of drivers and not, and then there's a response function, FS for supply, which responds to wage. And in it, we have a reservation wage, and we have a saturation wage. And of course, the slope is simply the wage elasticity of supply, which you can compute from data. By the way, data is not a problem, because all these companies have been mandated by governments to give us data, okay, to publish data, pretty comprehensive data. It's very unusual. These days, you cannot do anything without data. The customer demand model, we're going to look only at ride hailing. So there's the demand function, which depends on price. So there's the arrival rate of customers, but they may choose other transportation modalities. So you can ask when they exit the platform. You can make a pretty, I'm not going to get into the details. But again, there's a slope, which is the price elasticity of demand. And, it depends on how sensitive you are to price. And also there's quality of service. So for ride hailing, you really want to deal with the waiting time. So it's not just us. There are many people in the literature who've studied waiting time, and you can actually create a fairly decent model for the waiting time. The waiting time depends on the number of drivers, and then some constants. M depends on the road congestion, and mu is some other constant, which depends on customers going to other modalities. And you have this dependence. And so what we've done is to enforce a maximum waiting time. So you look at this variable, and you say it's less than 10 minutes. And that will give you a constraint on the number of drivers. It'll give you a constraint on, it'll give you another constraint, okay? So then the baseline case is the platform makes some decisions, no minimum wage. The employees are contract workers, which is basically the status quo. And you're trying to maximize the profit. This is the demand. This is the supply. Sorry, supply, demand, supply. And that's the constraint for waiting time. So let's just keep track of the symbols. So in this case, the platform modulates the wage, driver wage W, and the per unit delivery cost P. And the optimal profit, this is done sum 1 to 24. That's an expected daily profit is pi 0. Okay? Keep pi 0 in the back of your head. That's what pi 0 means. That's a status quo. Then another case is there is a wage constraint. So the wage has to exceed a certain number, okay? Maybe $18. But other than that, it's the same contract work. So it's the same optimization problem, except there's a wage constraint. Same decision variables, pi, and W. Now, W will not be always at the minimum $18 because in the peak hours, you need more drivers. So you have to go higher than that wage to attract more. Now keep this letter in mind, pi 1. Pi 1 is when you have minimum wage, but the drivers are contract work. And then the third thing is our idea of these shifts. Now, all the platform, what it chooses is the number of workers in each shift. So S1 through S24, the number of drivers in each hour will be n times, n is equal to the shift matrix times the number of drivers per each shift. And this has to, and then there's the waiting time constraint, and then there's the demand. And now we consider two different cases of 3 non-staggered shifts, 8 hours, and 24 staggered. Okay. And we can come up with some metrics. One is called to understand the effects of these two factors that these companies were complaining about. Oh, we can't afford to pay that kind of wage, the wage effect. To understand the wage effect, it's really the percent reduction in expected profit from baseline because of the minimum wage regulation. So we look at pi naught minus pi 1, that's the loss in profit, as a fraction of pi. We call that the wage effect. And then after that, there's a loss of flexibility effect. So let's say now I have this minimum wage pi 1, and now because of the flexibility, I compare it to my 2 other proposals for 3 shifts or staggered shift, that's pi 2 as a fraction of pi 1. So this is the additional reduction in profit because of the loss of flexibility when you cannot hire, workers, at will. So the results are the wage effect is significant. The platform suffers a 45% reduction in profit simply because it has to pay a living wage to the worker. So whereas their profit before was $500,000, this is just in the city of, this is the expected daily profit in the Bay Area. Because of the minimum wage, it goes down to 300,000. And then if you say, what about this flexibility? If you remove that flexibility and you only have 3 8-hour shifts, it further decreases by another, 40% or so. But then if you do the staggered shifts, then the decrease in profit goes from 300 to 270. So the conclusion is, if you have these staggered shifts, the complaint that, hey, I cannot be flexible to service a time-varying demand, that goes away. By staggered shifts, you can do it. As far as wage, we argue that no, you increase the fare. Now there's evidence that the price elasticity of demand is fairly high. Fairly low, because it's reasonably inelastic. So even that, go ahead and increase the price, and then you're profitable and you can pay a living wage, and stuff like that. Okay, so what happened is outcomes. So the result is, so we suggest that the ride-hailing companies can be profitable, drivers are treated humanely, but they spent $500 million or $2 in a political campaign to defeat this proposition that drivers are treated as employees. And instead, what got passed is $22 an hour for active driving hours. So drivers actually end up getting $11 an hour. We testified before the California legislature, but we're given 8 minutes, and it didn't work. And so our counter proposal was rejected. We did all of this together with a labor economist, and she received death threats for her opposition for her support of classifying gig workers as employees. Interestingly, she received death threats from these workers. They thought that her proposition would take away their jobs. This is the power of advertising. Haitian immigrants in Springfield eat your pets. People believe this. 10% of Americans believe the earth is flat. What can I say? I mean, I just want to, anyway, this is life. Will standalone transportation network companies survive? Well, there's some issue, there's geographic profitability, only in certain jurisdictions. Shanghai, they're thriving. New York City, they're doing pretty well, okay? But you need a certain demand density. You need a certain efficiency of the underlying transportation network. We're trying to quantify this in our research, okay? A lot of our research is a lot of data, simulations, this kind of thing. But our thesis is, the per unit cost has to come down. And the only way you can do this is by bundling. I gave you the example earlier of transportation network services and grid services. You've got to combine. You have to combine food delivery and package delivery. You have to bundle transportation network service. So if you want to combine ride hailing with the grid's demand charge reduction, it does work, because this is the demand for grid services, demand charge reduction. These peaks occur in the middle of the day, pretty much on a random day in the month. And that in the middle of the day is when there's a lull in the ride hailing demand. So these are there's complementarity, there's temporal complementarity. So when you combine these services, there's a greater effect towards profitability. There's also spatial complementarity. Everybody wants to take a ride to this is the map of San Francisco. The red is the downtown area. So everybody wants to go there, but then all the demand charge reduction is on the outer periphery because there are not many small companies and small businesses in the city core. So, you're automatically doing spatial rebalancing when you combine these services. So, and then we have some theorems about how you stylize the model. What if the two demands have this kind of intersection and this kind of separation, and you can start writing some theorems, which is what I'm in the business of doing. So there's spatial complementarity. Also in pooling, combine different products into one big bundle and then send it. And we did a very careful analysis for the last mile problem. So just to give you a bigger picture thing, so that's your service center. You can deliver over there to one home, come back. Deliver another package, come back. And in this case, the distance you have to travel scales linearly with the number of orders. But then if you combine orders, pick up all your orders, go here, there, and come back, it scales as a square root of the number. And it really doesn't matter what order you service this in. This is last mile delivery. So I know it's a traveling salesman problem, but we're talking about like 10 orders. You can just solve it by brute force. And then you can impose the quality of service. You have to deliver the food first before it gets cold, the packages later. So you schedule. So that's a lot of work. There's a lot of work in scheduling of packages. So basically, all I'm saying is you combine the orders, and it really helps. And then so we did. Of course, the more orders you combine, the less is the transportation cost per package. But then you hit the quality of service constraint. And then if it takes too long, you lose customers and so on. So then we did a careful analysis, and it turns out 6 orders is the maximum you can pool together. Okay, this is for food delivery. Okay, and if you go to Pizza Hut, they don't combine. They combine a little bit, maybe 2. But then they're not combining with other restaurants. They have a dedicated delivery service. This is the problem with transportation network services. It's become balkanized. There isn't a separate company that says, oh, we'll take care of delivering packages for many different, it's happening. Uber Eats is doing that. But okay, I'll skip this. So this is our sort of what we're trying to analyze now is a universal platform for combining transportation networks. So here's the thought. Suppose you're a small business. Maybe, Luca chooses to retire at some point, and I think he's from Treviso. And I think Treviso is famous for the peppers, is it? Or is that some other place? Radicchio. And, and in his retirement, he wants to sell the custom radicchio. But, he's not going to advertise and take care of delivery and billing. So he goes to Amazon. He goes to like an Amazon kind of, and they'll take care of everything. Advertising, delivery, they'll take 40% of his profit, but they will create a market where none existed. Okay? So if you want to deliver dry cleaning and pick up dry cleaning, you go to Amazon, they'll take care of everything, they'll advertise. You have a quality of service. It must be delivered in this window and, or when the person is home or picked up by this time. And Amazon combines it with other delivery services. They have the platform, they have the drivers, and they have the software to combine all these things. And this is the way transportation network services can thrive. And that's our thesis. So luckily for us, there was a professor in Berkeley, Phil Kaminsky, in IEOR, and he decided that faculty salaries are too low, even in the United States. And so he went to Amazon. He was tenured, full professor, and Amazon immediately tripled his salary and tripled. And so wonderful. So we have somebody who's at Amazon. So we went to Phil, whom I've known for a long time. Hey, listen, Phil, we want to try this. So in Berkeley, there are many small convenience stores. So the first closest one is right on campus next to Echeverry, 7 Palms. You might remember it. And I go there and they have to restock their convenience store. So there'll be a big, 20-meter Coca-Cola truck that comes and gives them, 3 cases of Coca-Cola. And then it blocks traffic. Then there's a Pepsi truck. Then there's a potato chip truck. This is nonsense. So we want to make a piece of software where the company, the little convenience store says, we need this, by this date, this deadline, restock, and a small truck will come and deliver these. It's a different business case, and we are trying it. We've convinced 2 small mom and pop convenience stores. We've convinced Amazon. So we're building out the platform. We'll see. So these days, so this is the software architecture, the platform. But these days, sort of research in academia, unless there's a tremendous pressure to either do AI and ML, and recognize cats and dogs quicker, sell you stuff you don't want. I want to build an app where anytime you go shopping, it asks you, do you really need this thing? I think that'd be a huge seller, and did you ask your husband or wife, do you really need, these new pair of shoes? Is it necessary? That's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions? Sandra?
Yeah, it's very interesting, the fact that successful stories come when you are able to combine services so that you flatten a little bit, the needs combining. And I was curious about the fact that somehow one problem is matching the time that people has, the worker has, with the services. I mean, you have these drivers that are needed for some period of time, and they are somehow not useful in other period of times. And I think that also workers could be modeled in the same way, and so to say, why do we think that someone has to do only one type of work? Because I think that we have been biologically designed so that we are flexible in the things that we can do, while civilization, the fact in which we tend to be specialized. So you are a driver and you have to drive. Do you think that also you could apply this platform so that you could also use as the work as a service that you might provide?
That's an interesting thought, but my initial reaction is no, because the companies want to be extremely efficient. It's this whole sort of assembly line model, right? So, you train a worker to be able to make this one thing, train them to perfection. So then they basically, you made them a robot. They can't do anything else. Okay? But they're very efficient at it. I think it makes things much more efficient if the worker is flexible. You think of, even in nature, if you look at the organization of honeybees, they're gatherers, and then there's like, maybe there's a number of people who mate with the queen bee, and then the queen there are people who take care of the babies or the eggs, so nature has also, I think, fragmented the work just for efficiency, and efficiency means survival of the species. So my initial reaction is no, like professors, like I would love to teach a class in Renaissance history. I know nothing about it, but I'll learn, I'll be flexible. University won't let me. I mean, to some extent, I'm tenured, and so I have taught the introductory graduate quantum mechanics class in chemistry, Chem 201. I might be teaching the intro undergraduate micro, but it's rare. And also, a lot of professors don't want to do this because teaching is viewed as a chore, want to go back to research, so I don't think it's going to work. I don't know examples even in nature where the worker is flexible. That's my initial reaction. On the other hand, they might be happier if you give them a variety of different tasks, so they don't get bored. I don't know.
Because you are talking about the type of workers that are not so specialized. I mean, they are not professors, they are only drivers for Uber, and so might be that.
Well, they're combining driving for Uber and then their day job, whatever their job is. They do this. But workers are viewed by corporations across the planet as a resource, as an exploitable resource, not as a resource not as human beings, not as something you nurture. That's sad. I don't know, man, I am so depressed today, sorry.
We see.
At least I didn't use any swear words at Trump, okay? In the morning, I was shouting. Yes.
That autonomous driving or autonomous system will change the.
It's coming. Now, if I go in San Francisco, I would say around 10% of the rides you have are fully autonomous, maybe more. It's a surprising that I thought it was just a research, a way for Google to waste their enormous profits, but no, it's there. So it's cheaper. You get an app, and this is the standard business case, business model. You make things cheap so everybody comes, takes your service, and then you raise the price once they're locked in. It's kind of scary that I've been in them. They're slower because they're being very safe. They work. You go in, it's kind of weird the first time you sit, there's nobody in the car. And now Elon Musk is saying he's going to stop making, electric vehicles for like people to drive, just make robo-taxis. That's his model. He's going to own the planet, and now he's unleashed. In the meantime, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is trying to ban polio vaccines in the United States. Die. Oh, thank God I'm old. My heart
the
bleeds
strength
for the young people in this room.
that we survive.
Yeah. So that's what I had, folks. Thank you. Yeah.
Is how will be or how could be the model change if you also consider transportation and delivery goods delivery by drones, so that you don't have to follow the road map, but you can travel.
That's coming. It is already there in Shenzhen. The preferred mode of delivery for small packages like a Starbucks coffee, a cappuccino in the morning, it is delivered by drone. And it comes within 6 minutes. You know, it's because they're dense. And so now there's a lot of research in NASA, JPL, NASA, at Berkeley. Shankar is also working on, you know, what are the rules? Like you have road rules, you know, no left turn on a red light, and, you know, traffic lights how do you modulate the airspace for drones, you know? Should there be exit ramps and on ramps, and even multiples of 1,000 feet or 500 feet for north, south and east, west? And, you know, how do you maximize throughput, you know, subject to a hard safety constraint? What are the rules? And drone delivery is coming. So that's another place where jobs are going to disappear. Yes, it's, you know, it's already here. Maybe not yet in you know, but it's there in China. China has the demand density to support it. You know, like 40% of all meals in Shanghai are delivered.
And
Yeah.
from China and Beijing will not be city. And I would say all people I know, they use delivery.
Yeah.
And all the teenagers they use. Like if you and we only have one app, WeChat. We use WeChat and we can deliver.
Yeah.
And you know the Uber or Google Map or everything inside
Yeah.
WeChat. And so if I only have this one app, I can do everything. And
Yeah.
if I want to do coffee or I want to have a lunch, 10 minutes at most, they will give me in my house. So it's like that. So
Yeah.
how can they do that? I'm very.
They have enormous market power, you know? And so now there's I don't know if you've seen the news, and the delivery drivers are very angry because, you know, these people have so much market power. They're cutting the wages of the delivery people who are coming on bicycles or scooters, because they're already making a huge profit, but they want to make more profit. You know, they've copied some bad things from the West. So now the Chinese government is maybe worried about social unrest. You know, that's their main concern. So they're going to step in and regulate wages, which is something unthinkable in China, to put in a minimum wage constraint on these companies. But, you know, I mean, so there's a lot of literature in economics that, you know, you gravitate towards a monopoly sort of, or an oligopoly model. You know, small companies simply get eaten up or driven out of business. And the most stable equilibrium is to have two or three competitors who have 95% of the market share. And there's some brilliant papers understanding the equilibrium of duopolies that there's a French economist, I forget, I think won a Nobel Prize for this work. A lot of, yeah, you can't stop it. You know, if you don't have WeChat, you cannot do anything in China. You can even charge your phone in a restaurant in, like, they microcent bill you, you know, I got a little more charge for 15 minutes, you know, you pay a little bit. crazy. And I can't read or write Mandarin, so I'm screwed. But it's amazing what you do everything without a phone, you're screwed.
You can grow radicchio.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for. Thank you for the presentation. The number of questions.